In this video, I'm gonna teach you how you can use the Dream Home Wishlist Method to reveal the must-have features of the home you actually need in 7 simple steps. And then, if you stick around until the end, I'm gonna show you how you can create a realistic action plan to implement those changes in your life starting today. It's time for change. Welcome to Chilla. First things first. If you're looking for easy answers, as in a pre-made list of features or products that are gonna magically transform your home into the perfect haven and change your life forever, then I'm afraid that I have bad news for you. What you're looking for doesn't exist, and if anyone tells you otherwise, well, it's bull. Why? Because the ideal home for you must be aligned with your actual needs. And your needs can be completely different from mine or from anyone else's needs for that matter. So if that's the case, how on earth can the exact same advice be the perfect fit for me, for you, and for everyone else? It can't. That being said, it's true that there are general home improvement tips that tend to be universally valid and can spark positive change in your life. In fact, I myself have shared quite a few of them with you in some of my other videos. But while those can be good and helpful, they can only do so much. The fact is that there's no YouTuber, influencer, guru, or life coach wannabe who can tell you exactly what your perfect home looks like. But there's someone else who can. You. See, you have the right answers. They are within you. The tricky part, though, is asking the right questions to get them out. That is tough. Not only that, if you've watched my video about the 5 dream home myths that are killing your dreams, then you already know that we've been fed so much misinformation about our dream home that it can be downright dangerous to trust our gut. Luckily, that's where the Dream Home Wishlist methodology comes to our rescue. What it offers is a free, simple, and easy-to-follow process that will allow you to understand your main drivers of happiness and will help you use those to reveal the home you need in order to experience your best self and to live your best life. Sounds good, right? Well, let's get to it. The first step to create a dream home wishlist that fits you like a glove is to figure out your needs and your main drivers of happiness. But that's trickier than it seems. Because while your wants are only skin deep, your real needs can be hidden under many layers of social pressure, misinformation, guilt, and self-doubt. As a result, a guess or a gut feeling just doesn't cut it. The only method to reliably identify your main needs and drivers of happiness is to look back and reflect on your own life. So step 1 of the Dream Home Wishlist process is to write down a list of real-life moments, actions, or experiences that have made you feel memorably good. Now, please note that these can be big, life-changing moments or little moments that brighten your day. They can be one-off experiences that will likely never happen again, or they can be recurring ones that happen all the time. At this stage, the only thing that matters is that you can recall their positive impact, because that is a pretty good indication that they were meaningful to you. For example, one of my happiest memories is when my literary agent informed me that we had sold my first book series to a publisher. It's been more than 5 years since, and it still gives me the chills. Now, that was clearly a big one-off life-changing moment, but daily life is also full of moments of joy. For example, I love pretty much every single thing about gardening, but one of the moments that I enjoy the most is anytime I bring back home something I harvested and share it with my family. So now it's your turn. Write down as many memorably good moments, actions, or experiences as you can recall. The more, the better. But please note that if they happened a long time ago, or if your life has changed a lot since then, you should first ask yourself whether you still feel the same way if they happen to you today. If the answer is no, it might be a good indicator that your needs have changed, and therefore it would be better not to add that experience to your list. On this next step, you're going to take every experience that you've identified, and one by one, you're going to try to distill it down to its very essence. In a way, it's going to be like peeling the layers of an onion. You start with what happened and how it made you feel, and you slowly work your way towards revealing the hidden whys. And I know, it can seem daunting at first, but this is one of those things that definitely gets easier the more you do it. Let me give you a tip. From my experience, a good starting point is to try to put into words what about those experiences made you feel particularly good. Did they make you feel proud, useful, accomplished, safe, loved? Use your own words to describe why you think that you look back on those particular experiences so fondly. There might be one main reason, or there might be many. Explore as many as you can, and you'll know you've dug enough and are ready to move on to the next experience when you can summarize what you've learned about yourself in 1 to 3 sentences that follow one of these structures. A, I'm the type of person who needs this or that, or B, I'm the type of person who derives great happiness from this or that. Let me show you how it's done using my own example. As I mentioned earlier, I feel great joy when I bring back home the harvest from my vegetable garden and share it with my family. And I think that the reason this experience is so memorable to me is because it fulfills several of my needs and triggers my happiness at multiple levels. First, there's definitely a feeling of pride and fulfillment upon seeing the results of my planning and hard work. In fact, if I look at other examples in my life, like this YouTube channel for example, it's clear that I'm the type of person who derives lots of happiness from working on challenging and ambitious long-term projects, especially when I feel that the outcome is heavily reliant on my effort and skills. Then, I also think that the happiness I feel when growing food and sharing it with my family taps into some primal need for security, as in being in control over my own destiny/survival. And that rings true because I do have a bit of a prepper mentality. I'm the type of person who needs predictability and order, and in particular, I derive great happiness from feeling that I have the means to protect my family's safety and well-being. Is that because I love my wife and kids madly? Well, yes, that's definitely part of it. But above all, I think that sharing the food I grow with them reassures me that I'm part of something bigger than my physical self, and I like it. Because I'm the type of person who needs to connect and belong, and I derive great happiness from feeling useful, needed, and loved in return. Once you've done all that for every single experience that you've identified in step 1, you'll have a new list that will look somewhat similar to this. And as you scan through the sentences that you've written down, you probably realize that a few of them appear multiple times, either word for word or with very similar meanings. If that's the case, group them and rearrange your list by placing those sentences that appear most often at the very top to indicate that it's very likely that they are your very own priorities. The goal of this third step is to transform your list of intangible needs into a list of tangible elements that your home could have to satisfy those needs. And yes, I know that this is the third list already, but don't worry, this will be the last one, I promise. Now, I'm going to give you 3 tips to put together this list of tangible elements. First of all, in order to get your creative juices flowing, you should start with the obvious. And to do that, you need to look no further than the list of moments that made you feel memorably good that you put together in step 1. Yes, the first list you made. Read that list again and think about the setting that made each of those experiences possible. Is there any significant component of those settings that could be an element, a feature, or a tangible quality of a home? If there is, add it to your new list. And don't feel limited by what you could realistically do or afford. We'll take care of that later on. For example, an obvious feature that my own dream home could have is a backyard with a vegetable garden. I know, shocking, right? Next, once the obvious is out of the way, let's take a look at the list you put together in step 2. Yes, the second list. That one is way more interesting because the beauty of abstract needs and drivers of happiness is that they can be fulfilled and enabled in many different ways. Just ask yourself, what about a home would help me solve this need or make it more likely that I experience this driver of happiness? Let's take a look at one of my examples. In step 2, I determined that I'm the type of person who needs predictability and order, and in particular, I realized that I derive great happiness from feeling that I have the means to protect my family's safety and well-being. So how could a home make my life more predictable and guarantee my family's safety and well-being? Well, for starters, the location of the home would matter. I'd likely be happier living in a stable country with rule of law and a reliable and affordable healthcare system, in a prosperous area with appealing job or investment opportunities, in an area with low crime and with mild weather and low incidence of natural disasters, and since my kids' well-being is so important to me, in a place with good schools where my kids could thrive. The status and condition of the home itself would matter too, of course. My need for predictability and order and my drive to guarantee my family's safety and well-being would be better served by a home that's owned by us instead of a rental, that's in good condition, either because it's relatively new or because it's been recently renovated, a home that's safe and comfortable, as in properly insulated and built with good non-toxic materials, etc., etc., etc. So you can see how a single need and driver of happiness can suggest many potential attributes for the right home for you. The third tip to help you get the most out of this exercise is to realize that sometimes the best thing a home can do for you is to get out of your way. And your home can do that by minimizing the resources you need to spend on it, be it money, effort, or time. Because the less your home demands of you, the more you have left to get and experience the things that really matter for your happiness. So back to my own example, this shows us a not so obvious aspect of a home that could have a massive impact on my need of predictability and my drive to ensure my family's safety and well-being, my home's affordability. Why? Because a home that me and my wife can easily afford would free up resources for investment and savings, would drastically lower our financial risks and uncertainty, would secure our long-term well-being with little to no effort, and as a result, it would strengthen our family's resilience against unforeseen circumstances. It's not hard to see then that the financial cost of my home seems to be a very powerful factor for this particular need of mine. And who knows, perhaps it plays a role in some of your needs too, or not, perhaps what you really need is time. Either way, please remember that the ability of your home to free up your limited resources is just as important as its ability to directly fulfill your needs. So there you have it. If you apply these 3 tips, you'll end up with a long list of tangible features, attributes, and qualities that could be part of your dream home wish list. And once again, you might realize that some items appear multiple times. If that's the case, just like you did in step 2, group them up and arrange them accordingly. And voila! Look at that! You've got something that starts to look like a dream home wish list. But hold on! Don't call your contractor or rush to Zillow just yet, because your dream home isn't going to require all the things that you've written on that list. In fact, some of the things you've written might be impossible or even harmful for you to get. Not only that, but I also wouldn't be surprised if you've written a few contradicting requirements here and there, because sometimes what's good for one of your needs might be harmful for another. But don't worry, we'll soon be taking care of all that. From this step onwards, the model is going to help you filter the list you've come up with to ensure that every single item that stays within it can actually result in a net positive to you and to your life. Because you see, right until now, we've only focused on the positive effects of those elements in your life, but we've ignored something else that could turn dream into nightmare in the blink of an eye: their cost. Like it or not, the fact is that everything has a cost, and every single decision you take regarding your home is going to require a trade-off in terms of money, resources, time, or effort. So unless you're a magician who can conjure things up out of thin air and keep them running without lifting a finger, you better make sure to account for those costs before committing to any change to your home, because it's in your best interest to only implement those changes that will result in a net positive gain to your happiness. In this 4th step, then, we're going to estimate those costs, which can be in terms of time, effort, resources, and/or money. Now, this can seem a little daunting at first, but remember that there's no rush to finish this in a day. Also, here are 5 tips that will make this process a breeze. The first tip is that you should estimate your cost in relation to your current situation, as in, what would it take for your home to go from its current state to a scenario where your home has that element in your list? For example, the cost to implement my vegetable garden in terms of money, time, and effort will be much lower if I already live in a home with available space for growing veggies than if I live in a city apartment with no available space to grow stuff. The second tip to do this exercise is that you should account for both one-off costs, like the cost of buying or building something, as well as for recurring costs, as in the cost of owning it, renting it, paying the loan for it, and/or maintaining it. And funnily enough, even though the initial cost of something might often seem more significant, it's very rarely going to be the one that is going to impact your home experience and your happiness the most. Because you see, once something is done or has been fully paid for, we humans have evolved to forget about the effort we made to get it. The running cost, however, is going nowhere. It's going to stare you in the face and hit your wallet or your schedule for as long as you keep that thing. So it's in your best interest to be as accurate estimating it as possible. Don't get me wrong though, when I say accurate, I mean accurate for you, because what we're doing is not an exact science, it's subjective. So please use the system and calculation method that reflects best how you actually feel, because that's the only thing that matters. My third tip is that you should consider all the different ways you could implement a change to your home with the respective costs before choosing one. For example, I could hire someone to build me the raised beds for my vegetable garden, in which case my cost would be mostly money. But I could also go to Home Depot, buy the materials, and use my own time and effort to build it instead. Or I could save even more money by looking around for free scrap materials, but then I'd be spending more time and effort, of course. The same thing happens with recurring costs. I could tend to the garden myself, and that would have a monthly cost in terms of time and effort. Or I could pay someone else to do it for me, and that would require way less effort, but it would have a higher monetary cost. The question then is, which of these different cost structures should you account for? Well, if you already know that you do something in a specific way, then list only the cost of doing it that way. For example, I would never pay someone to take care of my vegetable garden. If you're open to different options, though, list them all, compare them, and then choose whichever option feels less costly to you. The fourth tip to help you get the most out of this process is that you should do your best to take into account the potential side effects and hidden costs of implementing the changes on your list. For example, if I don't already have access to space to garden, my cost to incorporate a vegetable garden to my home will also need to include the cost to find and pay for that additional space, or the potential additional cost of living somewhere else altogether. So, when considering costs, do not look at each element in a vacuum, but try to consider the impact it would have on the cost of your home as a whole, as well as the impact it would have on your own home experience. In particular, you should account for any potentially harmful side effects. The last tip to help you get the most accurate results is to remember that the cost of implementing some of the changes you've identified to your home can be offset by the savings they generate. For example, a home closer to your work might be more expensive than your current one, but it will also generate savings in transport costs over time. Or, back to my own example, my vegetable garden will have running costs, yes, but it will also provide cost savings, as in drastically reducing our grocery bill. So I should take those into account too. And here's the exciting bit. Sometimes those savings can be so significant that the final cost of implementing that change in your home is actually negative. In other words, there are changes that not only can make your life better, but that can also save you time, money, or effort. So there you have it. Once you've estimated the cost for every item in your list, it's time to move to the moment of truth, our first reality check. But first, let me ask you something. Would you like YouTube to show you more chinchilla content so you can keep improving your life one change at a time? Then smash that like button and make sure to subscribe. It's time to get real and remove from the list all those potential features, elements, or qualities of a home that, based on their estimated cost, are simply not possible given your current available resources, be it in terms of money, time, or effort. Now, this might seem shocking to you if you haven't watched some of my other videos, but you've heard me right. If you cannot realistically incorporate those elements into your home now or in the near future, be it because you cannot pay for them or because you don't have the time, then that disqualifies them as components of your dream home wishlist. End of story. And yes, that applies to everything and always, even if you think that those elements could potentially have an incredible impact on your happiness. It doesn't matter. If they cannot realistically happen, let them go. Why? Because no element, feature, or quality of a home can turn your home into a dream home. Only you and your experience can do that. In other words, the concept of a dream home is only a relevant and helpful tool to improve your life and maximize your happiness if you can actually experience it. And not only that, you have to be able to experience it now or in the relatively short term, not in 10 or 20 years, because your needs are constantly evolving and therefore your dream home is gonna keep changing with them too. So take the list with all those costs you estimated and kiss goodbye to all those elements that are impossible for you to incorporate into your home now or in the near future. Next, you should check once again to see whether there are still any items left that directly contradict each other. For example, let's imagine that your list contains both living in a smaller home and having more space. If that's the case, then this is a good moment to check whether you can finally make a decision on which item to keep and which one to get rid of. Here are the three possible scenarios. If one of the items is higher on the list because you think that it has a higher impact potential on your happiness, and that item has a significantly lower estimated cost, then the decision is easy. Stick with the first one, remove the other one. If you can't really tell which item has a higher priority and the costs are more or less similar, then it might be better for you to eliminate both items from your list, since it could be a sign that the decision itself is not relevant or that it's too risky for you to change. Finally, in the unlikely case that you find an item with a clear higher priority but a significantly higher yet affordable cost, then you might need to weigh 2 more steps to make a decision. First of all, congratulations! After all the trimming that you just did, your list should be significantly shorter by now. And that's good news, but you're not done yet, because you see, the fact that you can afford to incorporate something to your life doesn't mean that the value of doing so necessarily outweighs its cost. And here we run into a problem, because while you have quantified the cost of every element on that list already, you have not yet quantified their value to you, so you have no means to determine whether they could result in a net positive or a net negative to your home experience. The question, though, is, can that value even be quantified? I mean, how can you measure happiness? Well, the Dream Home Wishlist Method finds a way around this issue, the break-even point. Let me show you how it works. What you should do next, using your new shortened list, is to review each of the items and describe what would be the absolute minimum return in terms of experiences and their quality, quantity, or frequency that you would need to get from those items in order for the balance between their cost and the benefits you reap to feel like a net positive. And yes, this assessment is going to be completely subjective, but again, that's what matters here. So, for example, let's say that I figured out a way to have a vegetable garden within my means. The question then is, how much should I use that vegetable garden for the cost to feel like a worthwhile investment? For example, I could decide that I need to enjoy my vegetable garden at least 4 hours per week in order for that cost to make sense. Now, please note that the units you use to express your return can be whatever you choose them to be, and can even change from item to item. There are no wrong answers, really. The important thing is that whichever unit you use reflect the sort of positive experiences that would fulfill your needs and contribute to your happiness. Your unit to measure the return of an outdoor barbecue, for example, could be the number of barbecue parties you organize per month. Or your unit to measure the return of living in your city's hip neighborhood could be the number of nights that you get to go out per week. Aren't you excited? It's time for the last step, the final moment of truth. Now that you know the absolute minimum return that you need to get out of every item on your list, it's time to determine how likely it is that you're going to be able to generate and experience that sort of return. For that, you should look at 2 main things. First, write down what sort of commitment or effort is going to take on your side to make those experiences happen, with the quantity, the quality, or the frequency that you've described. And bearing that in mind and knowing yourself, your past behavior, and your motivation or lack of motivation to change it, you should determine how likely it is that you'll generate the minimum return that you'll need. If you're likely to make it happen, great! But if you can see that realistically it's never going to happen, then eliminate that item from your list. For example, if I determined that I needed to be able to enjoy my vegetable garden for at least 4 hours each week in order for its cost to make sense, then what I need to ask myself is, can I dedicate those 4 hours each week to tend to my garden while it's still bright outside? Do I have that time? And even if I do, am I willing to spend it gardening instead of doing whatever else I would normally do? Well, I've done it before, so in my case the answer will be yes. But wait, because your commitment is not enough. There might also be external factors that affect your ability to make those experiences happen, like the weather, or being close enough to certain people or a certain place, or having access to a certain resource. If those factors exist, you must take note of them, because they might further constrain your ability to experience the benefits of incorporating those elements into your home. For example, would I be able to enjoy my vegetable garden 4 hours per week in an area with consistent droughts and limited access to irrigation water? Probably not. Or would I go outside to garden 4 hours a week if I lived in a very polluted city? That's also probably a pass for me. These are the sort of questions that you should ask yourself. And once again, any item that fails to pass this test must be removed from your list. After that, the only thing left to do is to make sure that your list doesn't contain any contradictions anymore. In the very rare case that it still does, now you can safely keep the item with the highest priority and remove from the list the contradicting one. And once you've done that, voila! There you have it! A 100% customized list of elements, features, and qualities of a home that reflect and respond to your own needs and drivers of happiness, then can be realistically incorporated into your home immediately or in the short term, and that are guaranteed to result in a net positive gain to your home experience and therefore to your well-being, lifestyle, and long-term happiness. In other words, you now have your very own dream home wishlist. Congratulations! But wait, because if I stop this video here, I'd be doing you a disservice. And the reason is simple. To implement your dream home wishlist, you're gonna have to leave the pleasant wall of theory and plunge headfirst into the muddy chaos of reality. And let me tell you, that task is anything but trivial. So while the Dream Home Wishlist Method helps you understand yourself and figure out the home of your dreams, I'm gonna share with you 3 additional steps that are gonna help you turn those dreams into reality. One of the great things about the Dream Home Wishlist methodology is that it's 100% centered in you, and only you. And while that is great to understand your needs and come up with a way to best fulfill them, it becomes a challenge the moment you try to implement what you've learned into your real life. Now, if you live on your own and you don't share your living space with anyone else on a regular basis, then see you in a few minutes because you can safely skip this step. Many of you, however, share your home with other people, and guess what? They all have their very own needs and drivers of happiness, and therefore, each one of them has a unique dream home wishlist which may or may not be very different from yours. You see where I'm going with this, right? To put it mildly, those differences could be a problem because your home experience is massively impacted by your interaction with those sharing your living space with you. In practice, what that means is that before you start making any changes to your home to improve your happiness, you better make sure that those changes are not going to be making someone else miserable in return. Because if they do, your potential happiness gains could evaporate faster than you can say, "Darling, we need to talk." So what's the best way to deal with this complexity then? With the 3 C's: communication, comparison, and compromise. And whether you use 1, 2, or the 3 of them will depend not only on the change you plan to make to your home, but also on the nature of your relationship with the other people affected by that change. Let's start with communication, which in my opinion is the minimum recommended whenever the change you want to implement affects others. That communication will be different depending on the nature of your relationship with those people. For example, if you are planning a new layout for the living room, but you have a freeloading guest who's been crashing on your couch for the last 3 months despite all your hints that it's time to go, then you might want to keep your communication unidirectional, as in, I'm doing this because of this, and there's that. In most cases, though, sharing what you plan to do, how you plan to do it, and why might not be enough. And you might want to engage the people affected by your plans in an open dialogue, giving them a chance to share their feedback, raise their concerns, or to clear any doubts. That being said, only do this if you're honestly willing to at least consider changing your plans based on their input. Because if nothing they could say could change your mind, then I think it's better to stick to informational communication to avoid fostering false hope and further resentment down the line. Your next tool to successfully navigate the complexity of changing a home that you share with others is comparison. And you could think of this as a VIP version of communication. Why? Because comparison requires you to share your dream home wishlist openly with the other person and to request that they go through the same process and share their own results with you too. All this with a clear common goal to figure out together a dream home wishlist that works for all. And as you can probably tell, this is a delicate process that involves opening up and sharing intimate details about yourself. And as such, it should be restricted to people with whom you feel are true equal partners in your life. If you live with someone like that, though, engaging in this process together can be immensely rewarding as long as you follow 3 basic rules. Number 1, always be respectful and non-judgmental. Number 2, always accept the validity of each other's feelings and needs, regardless of whether they match your own. And number 3, if at any point you feel that the other person is not following one of the first 2 rules, stop the conversation and calmly let them know. And this brings us to the last tool to handle the complexity of living with others, which is compromise. When you live with people whose happiness directly impacts yours, some sort of compromise is usually the best option. Be careful though, compromise is not the same thing as invalidation. Your needs and drivers of happiness, as well as the needs and drivers of happiness of the people living with you, are not on the negotiating table. They are what they are, and not you nor anyone else can do anything about them. There's nothing to compromise there. What you can and should compromise on is on how to satisfy the different needs of the people involved, or on whether you can do something to satisfy them better and improve yours or the other person's home experience. Here, you'll often find that by simply tweaking the how, you can reach win-win solutions. But in the rare scenario where some of your partner's needs are radically opposed to yours, your best bet is to aim for a no-lose, no-lose compromise, in which both parties give up on maximizing the fulfillment of their need and their happiness and content themselves with the avoidance of complete dissatisfaction. And once the process of compromise has run its course, you will end up with an updated Dream Home Wishlist that will represent not only you anymore, but also those sharing your home. The next thing you should do if you want to turn your Dream Home Wishlist into a reality is to reassess your priorities. Why? Because if you remember, right up to this point, the system we've used to rank the items within your list is based on their potential impact on your happiness, with the changes with the highest impact potential at the very top and the changes with the lowest impact potential at the bottom. Now, theoretically speaking, there's nothing wrong with that method. It's in fact aligned with the so-called 80-20 rule or Pareto principle, which theorizes that as a rule of thumb, 80% of the output from a given situation is determined by 20% of the input. In this case, that would mean that about 80% of your gains in your home experience would result from you implementing just 20% of the changes within your list. So in theory, it would make perfect sense to implement the ones at the top first. Unfortunately, reality is way more complex than theory. For starters, we're assuming that you can correctly rank all the items on your wish list based on their potential impact in your happiness, which, to put it mildly, is quite a stretch. At best, you'll be able to identify a few items that seem more important than the others, but that's about it. The second issue is that not all the items within your list are equally easy or readily available to implement. You might be lacking some resources at this moment, or the timing might not be right yet. So instead of waiting around doing nothing, wouldn't it make more sense to do what you can first and reap the benefits immediately? The final component of complexity is that not all the changes have the same lead time. For big changes like home renovation or moving to a different place, you'll usually need to go through a series of several stages, from planning to researching, sourcing materials, quotations, all the way to execution. Other changes, however, can be done within minutes. My recommendation then is to redefine your priorities by splitting your dream home wish list into 4 groups using feasibility and lead time as your discriminating factors. Let me show you. The first group should include those items that are feasible to be implemented immediately and that have a short implementation time. In other words, these are the things that you can do now and enjoy them immediately. The second group should include the items that are feasible to be started immediately, but that will require some time to implement. So basically, you have the resources, but the change cannot happen overnight. The third group would be items that could be implemented fast in the near future. These are changes that can happen fast once you do them, but for which you're still missing some of the required resources or the timing is just not right. And the fourth and final group would be items that could be started in the near future, but that once started, they will require some time to implement. And once you have those 4 different groups defined, then yes, you should arrange the item within each of them based on their potential impact on your happiness. And there you have it, a new action plan. You should start with the first group first and move your way down. Why? Because there's no better fuel for change than success, and immediate wins, no matter how small, will keep you engaged in the process and will start the virtuous cycle of the positive home experience. Not only that, those small changes will prepare you mentally for the bigger ones, and by staying busy with the things you can do right now, You will avoid focusing too much on the things you want to but cannot change just yet. In conclusion, do not underestimate the value of small steps and immediate rewards, because a positive experience of change will set you up for long-term success. And this brings us to the last step of the implementation process, which is to manage that change. Look, let's face it, it's easy for me to talk about changing this and changing that, but the truth of the matter is that change is not easy. In fact, we humans are creatures of habit, so change can be downright terrifying, and rightly so, by the way, because change is not for free. It has real tangible costs that, at least temporarily, are gonna impact your life. So I'm not gonna pretend that changing your home will be a breeze and leave you to work the kinks out on your own. Instead, I'm gonna end this video by sharing 5 tips on how to manage that change to ensure that the process of making your dream home a reality is as smooth and pain-free as possible. The first tip is to always remember that the items on your dream home wish list are worthless on their own, because only you and your experience can turn your home into a dream home. So, while it's great that you feel excited about improving your home, please remember that the items on your dream home wish list are not magic. And if you spend all your time and resources trying to make them happen, you're not going to have any time or resources left for enjoyment, and therefore, you're going to find yourself feeling miserable and confused. So to get the most out of this process, don't overextend yourself and always be very protective of your time. If that means that you need to implement less changes or to move slower, that's totally fine. The Dream Home Wishlist should work for you, not the other way around. The second tip to manage big change projects as effortlessly as possible is to avoid impulse and rely on planning. In other words, you should invest as much time as you need in figuring out the schedule and the steps needed to make the change happen, in researching and comparing your options, and in taking informed decisions. If instead of doing that you do things in a rush or last minute, you'll be much more prone to making costly mistakes, which can easily turn a net positive change into a net negative one. The third tip to manage change successfully is to ensure visibility all along the implementation process, both for you as well as for any other people affected by that change. If you all know what's happening, when and why, and you all keep track of the progress as it's becoming a reality, you'll avoid most of the resistance and pitfalls driven by uncertainty. The fourth tip to make change as effortlessly as possible is to make it gradual, because to a higher or lesser degree, we humans have evolved to value stability, and this is especially true for children. So instead of changing everything about your home all at once, consider when possible a step-by-step approach. It's true that even then, some of the changes in your wish list might be quite drastic on their own. If that's the case, and again, especially if you live with young children, it might be in everyone's best interest to follow that big change with a period of stability where any further changes are put on hold. The final tip is to always remain flexible. I said it before and I'll repeat it now. Your dream home wish list is a tool, not a law. So if you start implementing a change and things are not feeling right or not working out, don't be afraid to take a step back and reassess. It could be a sign that you are not yet ready for that change, or it could be telling you that you forgot to account for something or misunderstood your needs. It could even be just our old friend, the fear of change. Whatever the reason, only 2 things matter. First, that you spend time figuring out why you feel the way you feel and act accordingly. And second, that you don't blame yourself for putting on the brakes or for struggling to change your life. And I mean that. No matter why you feel the need to stop, there's no reason to be hard on yourself or to feel ashamed. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. As humans, we all have a strong incentive to keep things as they are. That's why you should feel proud instead. Because by starting this process and sticking with this video for so long despite my terrible English accent, you've already done so much more for your happiness than almost everyone else. And while I cannot help you defeat your fears, I encourage you to keep trying. Remember, small wins will give you the courage you need to move forward. So even if it's just a small tweak on your current home, give it a try. There is tremendous value for you at the end of this process, and I sincerely hope that you'll succeed unlocking all its potential. So that's all for today. Thanks for watching, and if you found this video useful, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any tips, questions, or suggestions, please let me know in the comments below. I always do my best to read them all. Thanks again, and see you all in the next video, here, as always, in Chinchilla.